All right, Dwayne, can you see the screen?
Anyway, I don't know how to manipulate their accounts very well
Or Pam?
because mine.
Yes,
Perfect, thank you.
I didn't ask Pam, I knew she'd be on.
I see Zoom.
Hi. She says Zoom.
Do you see
Oh.
Ancestry?
Ancestry. Now I see Ancestry.
Years, start in a couple minutes. So if this gets in the way, you can move this like anywhere you want on your screen, but depending on what you're looking at,
Okay,
if you want to see who's on,
that's fine.
you can see who's on, but from a presentation standpoint, it's better to just kind of get rid of it. But again, if that is in your way, you can just click on it and move it.
Okay, great.
Okay, so you should be good to go.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah, I thought it was.
That's where I want to start.
Do you want to zoom in like where it was, or do you want more on your screen at any given time?
I'm okay with this.
Okay.
This will be fun. Yeah,
Okay.
this will be great.
Excellent.
Oh, it's the handheld on the back. Where did you copy this? Did you copy this? The handout? Okay.
You know, it turns out that all documentation is relative.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Some of the censuses aren't very good either.
Well, it depends on the census taker.
Yeah,
It always depends on who took the census.
exactly. So you can't. At least you get to pick and choose.
We finished the Virginia thing tonight, this afternoon.
Oh, did you?
Last of it was the 20th century.
But you have it.
I have it. And so we need to sit and watch it.
Yeah.
I don't know how long it's going to be available. So, and then there's supposedly I'm going to look at their teaching thing because I bought the New York one. And
The what?
the New York.
Oh.
But I only got to see a couple of one of the videos. So I may be able, at that time, they only kept them for 6 months. So I may be able to go back and see it again. And if so, I'll share.
Yeah.
Because I paid for that stuff.
I'd
Should be
love
able
to
to look
see
at it.
New York.
Yeah,
In fact,
the black hole.
what we have to do is get registered for the first Saturday for March, so that we catch
Oh,
those.
okay, yeah.
students. We
yeah, I
got to
need
do that and go over there. I
Yeah,
want to do that.
yeah, we need to get that done.
I'm not sure. I don't remember what it is, but it will be good.
They do in the office.
What do you need?
Nothing.
And
Nothing. I figured out how to get to the basic search thing.
I have a pen. I have a pen. Oh, okay. That's because she's cool.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't have a pen,
I have a
but it's okay.
shitload of them on my purse. Anyway, they did 20th century this time.
Something stuck on my head.
So they've done the Civil War, well, they've done all the periods from colonial all the way through the 20th century each.
You're doing so good.
Of the Virginia.
I finished my class last week
Mhm.
and I'll start another one. You know, I got started onto this and then I updated the prospective member list. And it was 450 when I quit.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna go get some Duplo blocks and we're gonna do the genealogy one.
Yeah, either Friday, Sunday, anytime is good for me.
Okay.
Was Travis
Tomorrow.
gonna pop back in or he set you up?
No, he
He
disappeared.
he disappeared. I hope it works.
Should be.
It
Well,
says
I'm
you
sure
are
somebody will
screen
come on and
sharing.
tell
Yeah, I
us.
was making sure Tammy set up. When we bring down the really quick and then I get back, we just have them.
Okay.
I'm meeting with Rebecca tomorrow, Powers.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
gonna try to get and try to get a basic tree and see if we can go from there.
Okay. And then is Sarah basically ready to go? Or what are we doing with Sarah Richards? What about Sarah Richards? What are we doing with her?
I'd send her in mid-June
Okay.
because that'll give her another year dues.
Okay.
I offered the option to her. We're ready to go with her as far as I'm concerned. I have not printed the last 3 pages just in case.
Do we
there's
need,
changes.
but we haven't gone over it, have we?
Yeah, we
Have
did,
Did we?
but we probably will go over it before I send it.
Oh, that's what I
Again,
was
just to
wondering,
be
if we were to go
sure.
over it again. Okay.
We've been over it a couple of times, I think already, but it
I
just
don't
doesn't
remember- I don't
hurt.
remember looking at it once and then you gave it to me to look over. That's why you gave me that packet to look
Yeah,
over while you were
maybe.
gone and then, and all I had was,
It's pretty
Right.
well ready to go.
okay,
So,
so I didn't look at it again because of that. And
if I don't have anything else, I will do that.
Yeah.
Tuesday. But
I just think it might be a good idea to do it.
So, anyway. Well, I would probably need this
Yeah,
to
keep it.
look at.
This is fun.
We're
enough.
good to start.
Okay.
Think we're good to go?
Mhm.
Okay, Travis said we're ready, so welcome everybody. If we have anybody on Zoom, Travis will be monitoring that for us to make sure anybody that comes in
Gets
get out of
invited.
these.
Good.
We're really doing the remote thing tonight.
Yeah.
Gail Oathwaite is teaching our Ancestry beginning class tonight. So anyway, we're gonna get started with a word of prayer and I'll say that. Our dear Father, in heaven, we're thankful this night for Gail and Susan and for their willingness to help us learn more about using Ancestry for researching. Please, we're grateful that everybody arrived here safely and we'll pray over anybody that needs to travel. They'll also be watched over. We're thankful for all that we have. Father, in these days and sickness and distress.
Amen.
Okay, we should be able to go.
Okay. I'm Gail, and I'm known around here as the DAR lady. And I have to tell you, tonight's presentation is on very basic ancestry. Now, out of all the programs that there are available, and I have used many of them, I have to tell you my very favorite is Ancestry. They have a terrific search engine, and it just is so fun to use. It brings up stuff quickly. The other day, I was able to basically match a lady with a Patriot ancestor. In DAR, you have to prove lineages, and it has to be a proven Patriot that you are going back to. Pardon?
What proves it?
Proven meaning that the DAR has documented them. They had a place of residence during the Revolutionary War, and they had service. And that can be, if they had a pension, you're pretty well set. But many of them,
I just didn't know what.
yeah. Well, the problem is they didn't really open up pensions to the guys until 1834 and 5. Well, by that time, these guys are 70, 80, 90 years old. And so they didn't always get a pension. Let's just put it that way. But anyway, I was able to actually, through Ancestry, trace her genealogy back in 2 hours. I mean, it's quick. I really like it. Let's see. I want to show you how to use it. And then maybe if we have time, we can go over to the room and I can show you a little bit more. Now, what I have to tell you is I have to tell you, I have not noticed a difference, but I don't have a personal Ancestry account per se. But I have it on very good authority that there is a difference between the Ancestry accounts that are given to you, the access that's given to you, and the institutional ancestry. And institutional ancestry is accessed by coming over here to the Family History Center. I'm putting a plug in now, Rhonda, okay? Okay, coming over here and accessing Ancestry through the portal. Have any of you gone through the portal to access these programs? Yeah, you have, and you have.
I think there's
I
a
don't
question
remember.
here.
You don't remember, yeah.
I also have a paid membership
Yeah.
outside, so.
Yeah,
I
there you
haven't necessarily at this point seen a difference, but I have to look a little harder.
Yeah, well, it's, the portal gives you access to an incredible array of programs. American Ancestors, that's virtually the whole New England genealogical societies database. That is huge. We're talking, I don't know how many million names, but you're talking a huge database there. And so for the New England states, that's a terrific thing. Find My Past is great for Britain. There's just a lot of different programs that are fabulous. Fold 3 will give you access to military records. And military records can be very helpful in establishing documentation. And it's one of the things that is very excellent. You do have to worry about like in World War I, World War II, sometimes the guys really wanted to serve, but there were age limits. And so sometimes they lied about their birthday, their birth years to get in. So you kind of have to take it with, use it with the census records and be careful because sometimes that did happen. Okay, so how would you use Ancestry? Okay, basically, and this happens because this is Rhonda's computer. This is Rhonda's Ancestry, and it's not the portal that I usually use, okay? But, so the home looks different on hers than it would otherwise. But if you go to this search button and say all collections, and notice that you can be very specific in what you choose on this. You can just do, if you're just interested in birth, marriage, and death, immigration and travel. I, most of the time, just use all collections. I find it's a really great tool. And what you do is you come down here to a search engine and it gives you first and middle names, last name, place where your ancestor may have lived and their birth year. Now you can do approximate things and do the best you can with the names. Actually, Ancestry is really good about giving you a range of things. So you might be looking for instance, the other day I was looking for Sarah Plumbe, Plumbe, and she lived in Stonington, Connecticut. I know she was married in Stonington, Connecticut in 1740. The problem is, the records are kind of, they're hit and miss. They're old when you get back into that. So you may or may not be able to find it, but it was bringing up Plumb, Plum, and see, Plum could be any of those variations, and that's okay. Don't get real hung up on the spelling of names, okay? Does anyone have anyone they'd like to search? Just off the top of their head?
You were talking about names.
Yes.
Mine's the same way.
Yeah. They'll come up lots of different ways, and that's okay. And remember that most people prior to 1850 could not read or write, and that's because our public schools took a while to develop. So the average common person really couldn't read or write, and they were dependent on a clerk or a scribe. And so they would give their name. Now, keep in mind, maybe the scribe was Scotch and had a heavy Gaelic accent. And he's trying to listen to a person who's German or Pennsylvania Dutch, and they have a very heavy accent. And so they're going to hear something very different than if you're speaking English to English or German to German or Scotch to Scotch. So that's why in the ancient records, there are so many variations, because they simply didn't hear it the same. They didn't speak it the same, and they didn't hear it the same. Okay. Let's put in a name. I'm just going to play with this here. And put in a name. And you can, this is coming up because it's Rhonda's. Okay, a place where your ancestor might have lived. Let's put in, we'll put in Spokane. And I happen to know when she was born, so I'm going to put that in. But now if I would put in 1890, I can just about guarantee you she would come right up. So don't, you know, if you're not exactly sure about the birth date, try to figure it out. Now, basically how you do that is if, for instance, Sarah was married, and I was looking for a birth record for Sarah. Okay, for Sarah Plum. She was married in 1740. Okay, so I'm going to guess that most women are married about 20 years. You know, they're about 20 years old when they get married. This is going to give you a range. So it's okay. You're gonna be okay with saying that. It will bring it up. Okay, so we could say marriage, and I happen to know when she was married and where she was married. And she was married in Coeur d'Alene. And, you know, we can just put in fairly minimal information, or so it's okay. You even sometimes you can put in just the name, and you can, now I often do fill in the gender and the race. That seems to help narrow things down. Otherwise, you're going to have every race known to man coming up. And I'm just doing a general search now, and we'll see what comes up. Okay, here we go. I don't even know who this Randall family is. But here's Bernice S. Baylor, or it could be Bailey, depending. We have a 1900 census for her, and she's living in Spokane, Washington. And one thing I love about the 1900 census is you will get a month and a birthday a year. It's wonderful. I use this all the time. Here we have a marriage record. And
Good question.
mhm.
When you first got on there, it had, you know, a family that has done research on how much of a validity, do you ever look at those?
I do.
You do.
I do. I look at trees. Did everybody pick up a documentation cheat sheet? Okay, it might be a good idea to talk about that. Basically, and I assume that's one reason why you brought me in. It's because I'm pretty finicky about my sources.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
basically acceptable documentation, birth certificates. Well, I can tell you right now, 1891 in Spokane, and that's exactly where, this is my grandmother. She was born there. There is no birth certificate. Spokane did not record any certificates before 1906. So I can't use that, but I can use that 1900 census, okay? Acceptable documentation, birth certificates, there's a lot of things that are. It's really not, and some things that I have put as poor documentation, sometimes you're going to use that. It's not something that the DAR would take, I can tell you. They're very particular about their documentation. And that's why I put this in, because I would like to see the trees that we put into these things to have good documentation. So birth certificates, birth registrations, driver's licenses, death certificates, marriage certificates, applications, licenses, bonds, legal permission from parents. You don't see bonds anymore. But in the old days, sometimes that's all you can find is a marriage bond. And you might want to say bond. When we send in the applications for DAR, we actually put a bond or a
Or
license.
bad.
If it's not really a marriage certificate or even an application, we'll say
So
app.
like bans in the
Bans.
newspaper,
Yeah, yeah.
and DIR would accept a ban in the
Even though it's not
newspaper.
The
necessarily- it's
DAR
not
accepts
necessarily a
newspapers.
marriage.
Pardon?
It's not, a ban is not necessarily a marriage.
But it's an intention to marriage.
It's
It
an
may be
intention
all
to
you can
marry.
find.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you can look at that. You can't look at that going forward and say they're going to get married necessarily, because they do change their minds. But once you have a family, then you can go back and say, well, they did get married. They had all these kids. So then you have, that's what makes that valid. Does that make sense? Anyway, marriage listings, Bible records. A lot of the counties got rid of their marriage certificates, their stuff that they had. And so they just listed the marriages, but those are valid. Bible records, wills and probate records, social security applications and claims, cemetery listings. Those are pretty common. And some of that funeral home information. Did you know that funeral homes usually keep death certificates? You can save yourself a lot of money by writing to the funeral home and saying, I'd really like to have my grandmother's death certificate. And if you send them a self-addressed stamped envelope, they'll probably just mail it to you. Copy it and mail it to you and you'd have it. What we find, notice that here's a find a grave. Okay, let's click on that. Okay, now the tombstone is good evidence, but find a grave is not. And why isn't it? Anybody have any ideas?
Because somebody just put the information. in.
Exactly. Someone put that information in there. And actually, I was the one who put this in here for my grandmother. But now you can go here. This is find a grave. Did you notice how I clicked on the tombstone and it came up? I'm giving you my trade secrets here. I hope they're helpful. Okay. What we're using here is all that we can use. And if you go to the photos, then it's going to come up. Give it a minute. It's supposed to
You
come
can
up.
click on the
It's
photo
not
too.
loading.
No,
No.
it should come up. There's several different ways of doing things, but
Yeah, click on that.
there we go. And sometimes if you view original, it will be a little bit bigger. Now, I did not put this photo in here. Now, so this tells us that Bernice S. Moore, so we have a middle initial here. And she was born in 1891 and she died in 1987. Now, for the DAR, this is all the information we can use. That's the only, because usually when people put dates in stone, they have made sure, because they paid quite a bit of money for these stones, they've made sure that they're correct. Are they always correct?
No,
Not always. So with every piece of documentation, you have to remember there can be errors on it, particularly death certificates. Because maybe it's the son who gives the information and, well, he doesn't really know. And he never paid attention when his dad was talking about it. So anyway, a lovely picture of this. And then I go back for good documentation and, okay, come on, stop. I'm going to go back to, that's not Find a Grave. I'm going to go back to the actual Find a Grave site, and I would just do a simple page of this, no matter, sometimes there's a lot of interesting genealogy on it. Now, I will use that as a stepping off point to get documentation, but you can't use it for authentic documentation because a lot of times people just don't know about it. But you see this plot and the burial and this memorial ID, this tells you exactly. This is like a GPS coordinate practically. So you know that she's buried in the Masonic Memorial Park in Tumwater, Thurston County, Washington. And you know exactly where it is. And this part is very good information.
Do you save that?
Pardon?
Do you save that?
I
Do you save to?
save to, yeah, you can, what?
The save to down there. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, yeah, you could
You
do
can save it,
save.
you can save it to Ancestry is what I was
Yes, you
gonna
can
say.
save this to your tree if you want. And so then you have a piece, but the whole thing will save, but it's the way it is. Okay, anyway.
From Find a Grave, can you save it to your shoebox as well?
I
Can you-
believe so.
I believe you can.
Took me
Most
forever
of
to
the
find
stuff
your
on
shoebox.
here you can, that's what's so beautiful is, I just love that this comes up like this. And let's take a check and see what this is. My guess is this is a child. This is, yes,
Lionel.
this is my uncle. This is his death certificate. So there's all kinds of stuff you can find. And he died in World War II in Belgium. He was serving there in the Battle of the Bulge. And so anyway, but he was born in Benoit County in a non-existent town now, Treffry. And it gives his parents here, which is nice. Actually, this is his birth certificate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so gives you a lot of information. Thank you. Okay, so are you getting an idea now? Census records are wonderful. They are not always accurate, especially if the neighbor gave the information, but especially you can almost track a person. Like for instance, here's one in 1900, here's 1920, 1930,
1910.
1940, 1910. And if you can track that over all of that, you're probably going to do very well. Well, look, here's a county birth record.
Oh, that's unusual.
Yeah, I'm going to look at this because I've never, oh, it's
Good
for
job.
an aunt. It's not for her. And that's the other thing is it does bring up,
Places to do.
unfortunately, it does bring up their kids' stuff. Now, what I want to show you is, now here's the California US Death Index. She died in California. She was staying with my mother and who was her eldest child. And so she dies there. And that's what you have to keep in mind when you're doing genealogy is a lot of times the parents will go to live with it, especially if they're a widow. And unfortunately, a lot of times we women do end up as widows. And when we get not able to care for ourselves, we may go live with one of our children.
Keep that in
This
mind.
Western States Marriage Index, this is not good proof. I would never use this for mine. This county
Why?
marriage record is excellent.
Why is it bad?
Why? Because it's just not considered good documentation.
Go ahead and open it. So you
Yeah.
can see that. So it's just transcription.
It may be okay, it may not be. In this case, it is, but they aren't always. So be very careful about the documentation that you use. Let's see what else we've got here. Social Security applications and claims, these are very good. Select marriages, these county marriages, and this would be in the book.
Do the social security applications actually show the application? Or do
No.
they just show the end result?
No, I'll show you.
Maybe just transcriptions.
This is probably my uncle's, but sometimes there's very little information in it. This was her spouse, William E. Moore. And this was one of her children.
It doesn't give the date
And they've
on it or
left off the
anything.
R there, but you notice there's no record we can go to. You can write for these. And there's quite a number of records that you actually end up having to write for. Here's the 1950 census, which I don't have on her actually.
You might do the Social Security Death Index one,
Pardon?
the next one down, after 1950.
The social security death index.
Yeah,
Which one? This one?
The one up.
there.
Oh, yes, there is a Social Security death index, and I do use this a lot. It
Quite often
may,
has birth dates.
it may not tell you where they died. I can tell you because I do have her death certificate that she did die in Hanford, Kings, California. But you cannot tell that from this. This does not say that. It just says where she lived. So her death date is in January 1987. Notice it doesn't have an actual day. It was the 30th, but I know that because she was my grandmother and so
But it does have her birth date.
yes, it has her birth date. And that's, let me tell you,
So if you're looking for clues to lead you to an actual document, these are really good clues.
They are.
yes. And that's the same with this world of whatever. And there's another thing that comes up a lot. And that is, you'll notice Sons of the American Revolution papers. We do not use those. DAR will not accept those. They were not as well documented. DAR was very careful with the documentation, except for the very early numbers. North American biographical papers, sometimes those come up. They look like that world, this thing, sort of. And those are not, sometimes the information is good, but often it is not. And then there's a biographical, geographical indices or info, and those are not. Now, family trees. I use family trees for, not for the family trees, and notice this has disappeared now. But we could. Let's see if we can,
That will be her trees.
yeah, it's her tree. We could search public member trees. And now you're gonna have to put all of this information back in, but you will find a tree on her, and my guess is that Randall family tree will come back. Okay. So I'm gonna go to trees. Now, this is an individual ancestry account. So, so it's going to come up, oriented vertically. I hate that. So I always go up here and change it to horizontally, because I can make more sense of it going sideways than going up and down. And we can go over here to, I know because I just did a lot on Rhonda's. Rhonda just became a daughter of the American Revolution. So we're really excited for her. And she has some really interesting characters. And one of them is this Hamilton Bradford Ware. And let's take a look at him. And you know that you have to hit this if you want to go out farther. Now, she doesn't have the father in here, but we know who he is. We found him when we did our research. So this would be like what you would see, and you could look at his profile. And it will come up something like this. So he was born here then, and his marriage was to Nancy Ann Townsend. And then he died at this time in this place. And I don't think that's documented, but that's okay. We did document something. One thing I wanted to show you is now, see, I don't use this information as a source. This is not documented. See, you have to have documentation, and it will be right in here if there's documentation on this. So we can go back to the tree, and there's something really interesting. And you see these leaves on here? These are hints. And so we can hit this. Come on. Go up here and hit this one. And you notice there's 20 and hints. So we can go down here and now, oh, looky here. Here's a picture that someone has submitted. Is it documentation? Not really, but I'll tell you what, that's interesting to me. I want that picture. Here's a biographic summary.
Keep putting 2 meetings on the same night. I'm having trouble.
I know. Hi,
Hello.
come on in.
How are you tonight?
Here's a biographic summary. Is this documented? No. But it may give you some ideas as to where to look. Now, here's another photo, and it's a bunch of people. And again, you're going to have to ignore all of this stuff because this picture is not going to tell you this information. You do not know. Now, once in a while, I have used pictures to look at them and see the style of clothing that they're wearing. And if they're wearing clothing like they wore in the 1860s, I know I'm not looking in the 1900s for stuff. So that does help me. Okay, now here's some letters. Oh, looky here. Here's some compiled service records of Confederate soldiers who served in organizations from the state of Arkansas. And now that, let's review that one. Oh, cool. Looky here. Here's an oath of allegiance. And now, unfortunately, and you can click on stuff and it enlarges. This is such a fun program to use. I really like it. Unfortunately, you can't read this. That's why I don't like doing genealogy through the trees. And I have a hard time getting people not to do that. If we would bring up Hamilton B. Ware, this oath of allegiance comes up and I can read it because you're not doing the copies of the copies, okay? So I really encourage you to go into Ancestry itself and do the search like I did for my grandmother, because you're going to find a lot of hints over on the right-hand side, a lot of documentation that you can go through and look at. Let me show you. Does this make sense? Anybody have any questions about that? So you can view that and you can go down and see it says save to tree. I can save that to Rhonda's tree. Now this is a death certificate. See, it says children Robert King Ware. I can guarantee you this is not his death certificate because that's not him. Okay. Now here's the county marriages index. And we can review this. This is
It's the second one.
oh, I thought they'd have the original. They don't. That's okay. The marriage date is 28th of October, 1886. Now, this lady, Minerva Sinclair, he was married to. his Nancy Ann Ware, who was the mother of his children, she had passed away. So he remarried. And in those days, most of them did because they weren't going to change diapers, that's for sure. Or fix all that food. So we can go, let's see, okay. I'm not going to put that on the tree because that is not Rhonda's direct line descendant. So here's 1870, 1860. These censuses are really fabulous. I want to show you this document. This was such a neat find, and I did not expect him to be on this census at all. This is an 1850 census. And again, I would do this through the search engine, not through the trees. I do use these hints. I do go in and I use the sources. The sources are very similar. And you can go in and use those sources. But again, don't just randomly write down stuff because you find it. Check your sources and make sure that your documentation is good. Well, and it's not going to come up there. Okay, let's go back and do search. We'll do all collections. And let's just do Hamilton Be Ware. And this is spelled differently too often. And he lived in Arkansas. And his birth year was about 1829. And we know he was married to Nancy Ann. I don't remember her last name right off the top of my head, but he's a male and he's white. And notice I'm not putting in a lot of information. You don't have to put in every piece of information that you know to get results. You can put in, sometimes less is more. Not always, but a lot of times it is. Okay, and there's a tree here. And when I did searching with Rhonda for her Patriot, I was searching these trees for sources. I can tell you right now, a lot of times you'll find something in those trees that somebody has, a death certificate maybe. It's not on the internet, but it's in that tree and you can use that. You can print it out. Okay, so here's the 1860. Here he is on the 1850 census. I'm going to hit that. Now, I'm going to show you, see what comes up? You have a quick face page, okay? Without ever looking at this document, somebody has transcribed this. Look how old he is in 1850. I can tell you right now, I do not expect very many 21-year-olds to be in their parents' households in 1850. Most of them have moved on. But guess what? He's a student. He's attending school. Well, he's kind of old for school, isn't he? But looky here, he's in the census with Mary Ann Ware, who is his mother. This is his sister, and these are his siblings. I don't know who the Wilkinsons are, but we'll go over here. And now I have to warn you, now the 1850 census is the first census where the household, the head of the household is listed, usually the wife, if she's there. I mean, sometimes these are widowers. All of the children are listed. They do not call them children, okay? It's 1880 is the first census that begins to list what the relationship is from the head of the house to the individuals listed in the household. So, but I think generally you can make some generalizations here. So we're going to go down here. Here we go. And I'm going to make this a little bigger so you can see it. Here we go. Mary Ann Ware. And now most censuses, it doesn't say this here because 1850 was our first census of this magnitude of detail. The other ones before 1840, 1830, 1820, 1810 1800, and 1790 are all tick mark censuses. So they list the head of the house, and then they have age categories and sex. So the males will be listed, and then age categories like 0 to 5, 5 to 10, maybe 10 to 15. And then they'll have over 21, or, so, but there's age categories. And then how many males, for the males, and then for the females, and they're just tick marks. So you have to, it's very difficult in terms of census. But looky here, he is a 21-year-old male and he's a student. He's in medical school. That's why he's a student. So, it was really exciting because he was a surgeon, working as a surgeon in the Confederate Army. And he was actually captured. So we'll go back and look at this. Now, the other thing, you can click on the image and the image comes up. You can scroll in, scroll out so that you can get a whole picture of it, or you can make it tiny. And I often, for the DAR, I make a whole full page, and then I go down to the people I'm interested in this case, these people, and then I start making it bigger. And how do you print this? Well, what I would do is I would go here to the tool, and it says print. So I'm going to click that. I can print the entire image, and this will print out on this piece of paper just like this if I set it to portrait. Or I can print the zoomed view. And now this one, I'm going to, and it will tell you which is probably best to do. Certain censuses are better on portraits, certain censuses are better on landscape, but I just follow it. So continue. And you can see it was set in portrait mode, but we can change it to landscape. And notice how much more. In fact, I would go back and probably get the states that they were born in. I won't do that right now. It's just playing with this and getting, shrinking it enough. And then I can go down here, and this is another cool thing that I do all the time. And that is I go down here to the scale. And I use a custom scale, and it gives me this little 100%. Well, I can, because I think that's not big enough. I want it to fill the entire page. So I just hit this and play with it. And usually it will make it bigger. See how much bigger that is now? And that's going to give you a better image. The bigger you can get it. And I do this with Find a Grave with the monuments, because you can get those to fill your page. And then you just have this on that page. So you can really look at it later on.
Documents that are in tiny print, wills, things like that. This is nice.
Yeah, this is really nice. I use this all the time. And particularly when there's a lot of kids and whatever.
The bad part is it only works in Ancestry.
And then, of course, you just hit print
But
and
you
it
can
will print
save
for you.
it to your tree from here.
Oh, I
Yes.
know, yeah, but I mean, if you're looking at
Yeah,
something from
that's
a
true.
newspaper or something, you can't
Yeah,
necessarily. do
yeah,
that.
yeah.
You're gonna do-
So
do
what I
this
was
now.
saying is you can go down here and see here, this is where they're all born. So I probably would be a little more careful with how whoops, boy.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
it
have
is
to use a little
big.
circle here. There we go. I often will cut off these numbers, but just get this part. So we probably could go just, nope. Up to you. Come down just a little bit. There we go. Sometimes it's sensitive, but I would probably print it more like this. And then I can see where Marianne's born in Tennessee. Luciano is, guess where Hamilton was born? Tennessee. And then he went to medical school in Alabama. Went to school in Alabama and in Georgia. So, and then he marries Marianne where? In actually in Georgia.
Nancy.
Yeah. His wife, the mother of his children. Now, see these Genie Annette Community Trees Index, be very careful about those as documentation. But again, the censuses are excellent. The global find a grave thing, probably not good. This death certificate is 1969. This is not him. It is for one of his kids, very likely.
May I say something though about the global find a grave thing? It tends to just show up as a find a grave. It's just a different index for the same thing.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
So, but again, it is not, this is
You
not
can't use that.
considered good documentation. So, yes. All right, so here's a family photo. That's nice. Here's US Civil War soldiers. Here's marriage records from select counties. And this, I believe, probably has Marianne Ware in it.
I think it has Nancy.
Huh?
Nancy.
Nancy, I'm in.
Mary Ann's as well.
Marianne, that's his mother. I'm sorry. I'm misspeaking here. But here we have N.A. Townsend. And then this is the original certificate. And I go for originals primarily. And then I always go back. And this is why I like Ancestry so much. And I like the institutional because I have this I can put in. I can attach this to your tree if you want. But I can also print this out. And this gives me a quick reference to this. And I will usually not only print this in its entirety, which will print pretty well on a landscape, but I will also find where they were married. And I don't remember exactly, and this is being really wonky right now, but we'll find it. You have to kind of read through this, so it gets a little tedious. But there it is, right there. State of Georgia, and there's the page number. And I would print this out probably pretty much like this. And again, you go to the tool, say print, and if you can do the whole thing and then go right back after it's printed it, then you go back here and say print zoomed view. And see, it will pull it just like this, and it will tell you, set it to landscape. So you continue, set your printer to landscape, and then you can play with this little thing down here and get this a little bigger if you want. I usually play with them until they drop off the end of the page. And then I go back so that I get them as big as I can. But you can see, you can read that pretty easily. And then you could print that. Now I'm going to mess up all your settings, so you'll have to go back in here.
You know
now.
what? You do it.
Okay. The other thing I was going to say is, we're going to go back. We're going to cancel this now. And we're going to go back to okay, come on. Okay, so I use this a lot to do my main thing. But one thing I will say is when you're searching, print what you see. Because I can't tell you why, but any genealogist you talk to who uses Ancestry, American Ancestors, any of them, if you go back into that thing, oh, well, I'm tired
find
now. I think I'll go home and I'll print that tomorrow. You're likely not to find it.
But that's what the shoebox is all about.
Huh?
Yeah,
That's what the
saving it to your
shoebox is all
shoeboxes, yeah.
about.
Yeah.
I get tired, it all goes in the shoebox.
Exactly. But if you haven't printed it, it's not going in the shoebox and you may not find it on this. And I can't tell you why that happens. You'd think it's electronic. It'll just come back up, but it doesn't. And so
Yeah.
you have to go back in and check it out. And see, there's some really cool stuff here. He was, he served enlisted in 1862. He was a captain. He mustered in from Arkansas. And this doesn't say anything about his training, but I wonder if that other one is in here. This is such she had such neat. No, it isn't. Now, see, this is another thing. When we were doing the genealogy, remember the oath of allegiance came up in here,
And
but-
now it's not.
huh?
And now it's not.
Now it's not. That's a good example. Why you want to print what you see that you want out of this list,
Or save it to your.
or
tree.
save it to your tree. Or you can save it to a thumb drive. I caution you about that. The other day, the Family History Center was closed. I usually meet my people here. So I went to the Hayden Library, and they have Ancestry, but they have an older version, and they have a very old computer. And so I poked my, and it's expensive and inconvenient and a pain in the neck to print there, basically, because Hayden Library.
Yeah, yeah, it goes behind the counter.
It
and
goes
it's a pain.
behind the counter, and so you have to, it's a pain in the neck. And so you've got to walk from the genealogy section all the way to the end of the building and then back. Trust me, you don't want to do that. Anyway, so I was saving it to a thumb drive. And when I went back home and pulled those things up, all it was were sheets of code. Now, some of the things had come through. Thankfully, I was able to find the same stuff when I brought it up.
Thumb drive is fine, it's out across the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. Flying thumb drive.
Those are my tips. The other thing I would say to you is, if you ever want to do DNA on Ancestry, and it's a good place to do it because a lot of people have done it on Ancestry, make sure you have a tree in Ancestry.
And I think they allow for that even if you don't have a paid subscription.
Yeah.
I think they will let you.
You can do minimum.
You can do it even if you don't have a paid
Yeah.
subscription, if you're going to do and so mine is just in skeletal.
Yeah.
The names are there, but that you only have to have the names. And I think I did put in birth and death dates, but I didn't get far enough that I could put in all the marriages. I can do it at a later time. I'll have to, do it differently. But the point is if you don't have a tree, and I would say at least 50% of the people that do DNA don't understand that. And they don't have trees,
Or they have a tree that has 3 people.
right?
Or all they want really is their ethnicity. And
Yeah.
that's all they care about.
Yeah,
But it's very frustrating.
For the rest of us that are
They're
cousins.
trying to find,
well,
missing links.
the reason you
They
want
might
your
be the
tree in
smart
there
ones.
is that Ancestry will go through and identify your cousins out of that. And now for me, that was incredibly invaluable. You have to understand, I lost my dad when I was 7. I knew nothing about any of my family when I started this journey of finding. I knew nothing. And I don't think my parents knew. And some of the stuff that I was given when I was a teenager wasn't even accurate. It's amazing when you can find inaccuracies in other people's stuff. But the thing that I really appreciated was I had all these cousins coming, like from the Hines. Do you realize that the child of my revolutionary ancestor was the one who married Mary Hines? Do you know how many generations? This is not supposed to go back much more than 6 generations. That is more than 6.
Yeah.
Because that's I don't even know how many greats it is. 5th great grandma, I don't know. It's really down there. And she showed, and I was able to connect with people that were related to that Hines family in Canada. And they gave me information I would have never got. They had all kinds of stuff. So be sure that you put your tree in and not only that, but I had enough of this, I evidently picked and choose chose quite interestingly. Because there was a cousin there, and then there were cousins here. And there were cousins here, and there were cousins down here. Are my parents my parents? Without a doubt, they are my parents. And all the bloodlines are, pretty straight in my family. That's not always the case. And this can be useful to find them. But be sure you have your tree in there, because those distant cousins, that is, to me, it was invaluable, because see, I don't have siblings that I can compare DNA to.
Well, and to find photos and documents.
Yes.
That somebody, because, you've got third or fourth grade connection up here, and everything gets dispersed through the generations. The only way you're gonna find those photos and documents.
Well,
that are
that's
stuck
why,
in somebody's shoebox in a closet is to find those cousins.
Yeah.
You gotta have that cousin bait out there.
yep. It's really fun. Anyway,
You're getting into my talk.
no, I'm not gonna get into your talk.
Okay.
And here's
That's
proof.
fine.
I even gave her my stuff so
Yes.
that she can make a good point with it
Okay.
when she has her presentation next time. Now, do you
I'm
have any
doing
questions?
Ancestry DNA.
Yes, she's doing
Awesome.
Ancestry DNA.
Awesome.
Any questions?
And just a comment though, because you mentioned the DNA, one of the things that I have found with Ancestry, and I haven't gone as much as I should in some of the others, but one of the things I've done with Ancestry is they don't do much in the way of DNA outside the US.
I'm sorry,
No,
don't
They
do
don't.
what?
So most of my ancestors are German.
Yeah, most of
So on
your,
my father's side,
Yeah.
on the through lines, I've got like 3,000 people. On my mother's side, they're on the US, got like 39,000 people. And that was, Pam mentioned to me to, and so I went and did with my heritage, which I don't like at all. But they have, if I want the German stuff, I'm gonna
Yeah.
get more from my heritage than I'm gonna get from Ancestry.
European.
Yeah.
Find my past,
Find My Past is English, I think.
that's, that's British, my heritage is.
Yeah, your heritage is-
Europe.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
That's something that's important to know, is
And it's
which
all hard
DNA
for
companies
Raul.
do what.
Yes, it is.
It's all hard for Raul because he's Puerto Rican, so it's
Yeah.
Puerto Rico and Spain and, the Canary Islands.
The
and stuff.
countries that are really not that well tested.
Well, Spain has done a lot. If he,
Yes.
if he could go to Spain and, he could get all kinds of stuff. But as far as finding it on some of the platforms we have, he's finding what's actually in Puerto Rico, he's finding that part. pretty good, but
wow, if you have that many ancestors, that's amazing. Are they all documented?
Most of them. It just, it gets convoluted because people from Spain, from Sevilla, for instance, where my ancestors are from, they migrated to the Canary Islands.
Oh, neat.
And they migrated because of the Inquisition
Mhm.
in Spain. And so no one told me that there was a possibility that they migrated because they had Jewish.
Yeah.
role.
Yeah.
And the Spanish government, joined the church
Or leave.
or died.
and it's hard for him because his last name is Diaz and his mother's was
Yeah, nobody-
Lara and
nobody
Garcia,
ever
and so they're
mentioned to
like
me.
Smith and Jones.
When I was growing up, that there was anything
Is there
Jewish in my
Diaz in
family.
particular.
And I don't know that for a fact that there is, but I'm guessing, deducting, putting two and two together. But anyway, they went to the Canary Islands. From the Canary Islands, that group migrated to Puerto Rico, Venezuela, Mexico. and,
That adds a whole new dimension, doesn't it?
Brazil or.
When you get into
Yeah.
foreign records,
The
yeah.
ones in Puerto Rico were all Catholic.
Yeah, I was raised on a Catholic, and my entire family was Catholic. Not real practicing,
That you were
but
Catholic.
there was never any mention of any other religion.
There weren't any other religions.
No.
Not in some of those areas.
No, there weren't, yeah.
There were.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, we went to Ancestry the other night. And I've got a partial family tree. And somebody had already worked in to my tree.
Or was that family search?
No, you were in family search, you're messed up in family
So it
search.
was family search.
Yeah.
I
But
messed
somebody
you up
had
in family
already
search, she's gonna
inputted
meet
some-
with Pam next week.
inputted some data in there, and there were some names, like, who are these people?
Yeah, well, I would encourage you, check out, I use trees as a starting out point. Because
Hints.
I don't know that it's inaccurate necessarily. Neither do I know it's accurate. So it never goes in my tree until I've checked out the documentation on it. And when I start checking out the documentation, then I put it in the tree. And I have a little way that I do that. I say, in my tree, I have perhaps, and that means I don't know if that person belongs in my tree or not. Somebody has said they did, but I don't know. And I don't, sometimes it's helpful to have a little starting gate, so you can check for the James Smiths. Because otherwise you wouldn't know whether it was John or Peter or Paul, and you would have no way to check documentation. So I do use them, but I'm very careful, and most of the time I use the documentation in them. And some of the trees are so well documented. It's wonderful when you find those. Some of them are just like this. They have such documentation. They have
Available, yeah.
You know what's
great
funny?
stuff.
That you can go into so many rabbit trails.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Call those BS zones, bright, shiny objects.
I'm gonna
For
turn
instance-
Or rabbit holes,
Or
yes.
rabbit holes, yeah.
Yeah, for instance, I was just looking at other things totally unrelated to the tree. And I went into the Holocaust Museum. And I punched up the list of victims at Auschwitz concentration camp. There was my family's last name.
Oh,
So and these people were enlisted from like Latvia, Lithuania, New Europe. And so how did that
It's
happen?
hard with a common name.
So how did these people get there? So I'm making the connection that they fled to the Canary Islands because they had Jewish, they had to be. And the Nazis kept accurate records beyond belief. They didn't kill anybody unless they wrote their name down. And all those records. all those records
That's supposed to be
are
something we're happy with.
well, eventually they'll get all those records online,
Yeah.
but to tell you the truth, always keep in mind, there's probably only maybe 30% of the records out there online. It's even in the US.
Or they're
And-
saying 20% or something.
Yeah,
like that,
and
long
I've heard
ago.
20, but
Yeah.
I'm guessing that in the intervening years, because so much more is coming online. So what I do is I go back and periodically check all these people because something else will pop up. Oh,
Something-
they
some
now
document.
have their death certificate on there.
Mhm.
Oh, and then I don't have to pay for it.
And maybe the states change some of the rules,
Yeah.
I mean, like I'm trying to find a divorce certificate in Oklahoma. And there aren't any online. I'm gonna have to write to the state to actually.
Right.
and
Don't
hope they
forget,
can Find it, yeah.
depending on how long ago it was, it might be in the Indian records. And I would have never thought of that.
The Indian record?
Yes, some of the border states in Arkansas, I was having trouble, and one of my really smart people on my genealogical committee, she said, it might be in the Indian records. I would have never thought that, but don't forget, you're talking early days of this country. And, we didn't have people segregated like we do, put,
Well, and if you're
boxes as
talking about
much.
Oklahoma wasn't a state even in 1900.
no,
And it was still Indian territory. And I have a relative who married there, and the marriage records, he married an Indian too. But a lot of stuff was in Indian records anyway, white or Native American, because it was Indian territory.
Right.
Choctaw.
Shoshone.
that was the organized
Yeah.
governmental
Cheyenne.
structure. We just don't
Cheyenne.
understand what went on back then.
Mhm.
So anyway, If there aren't any more questions,
Thank you.
I think we should,
Thank you, Gail.
you're welcome.
2 weeks, you get to hear about DNA.
Oh, I'm so excited.
I have a question.
Excited.
And I don't know how to shut off Zoom.
Bye, Zoom.
Can I get a question in?
Oh, yeah, you
Yes,
can.
Absolutely.
I've heard that, so you go ahead and build your tree into Ancestry, and I've heard that other people doing the research, they can get in and make changes to your tree.
Not an ancestry.
Mess
Not
it up.
not in Ancestry. They can do that in Family Search.
Okay,
Ancestry, it's closed off. You can't make changes to someone else's
You
tree.
can find, I mean, like my mother, and she only had me and my brother, and yet I found her in 3 other trees, and I'm guessing that she's a cousin to somebody.
Oh, you'll
because
find
she's
her in
not a parent.
trees, but they
You'll
can't
find them in
change
trees,
your
but-
tree.
But they,
Yeah.
they didn't change it on my tree.
No.
Right, exactly. They may change
There's
other
it's
things.
password protected.
But it's surprising when you see, you bring somebody up and you see that they're in 3 or 4 other trees.
Does
Yes.
that answer his question?
Does that answer your question?
yeah, thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
You
Any
can,
other-
Go ahead.
you can even make your tree so it's not searchable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it won't pop up when someone does a search for someone's name. And you can also invite people to be able to edit and view your tree.
You can invite them to not only, you can invite them to only view, or you can invite them to view and edit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have a real control with Ancestry over what somebody else can do.
Yes.
I don't think I've got
And
somebody
in
else
my
that
tree,
would-
I love the
I've got
internet, but
people
it's a
view.
love-hate
That's what I
relationship.
do.
So mine is under a code name, and I don't even have my name on my tree.
Some of them are like that.
So-
A lot of them are like that.
Yeah.
I see a lot of things like that. I communicate with.
The
people
other
I
thing that
don't
Ancestry
really-
does that I like very much is that anyone who they even suspect might still be alive, the name doesn't show up. The only people that
Right.
can see it is if your tree is open to the public, the only people that can see that is you. You can't, or someone invited to your tree, to see, view your tree.
Living is blocked.
Yeah, all the living
Yes.
people are blocked.
Any
I
questions?
think we're done. Is there any other
Any other
questions?
questions or comments?
You just keep plugging.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Gail.
I'm the you're welcome. I'm the poster child for, you know, you can find stuff out. I have got quite a breath.
Okay, DNA.
Oh, screen sharing.
We'll
Stop
see you
sharing.
in 2 weeks.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna play with DNA.
It's gonna be interesting.